Re-elected to restore the United States' status as a world power, Donald Trump will face enormous military challenges, including China's remarkable rearmament. To what extent will he be able to re-establish the United States' hegemony? That's what we'll see in the video that's starting now. Join us. Lá Combatentes from the Tagara channel. In today's video, we're going to analyze some trends of Donald Trump's government in the military aspect. Well, to recall, Trump, who was once the President of the United States, knows his country's governmental machinery well and returns to power now at the beginning of 2025 when he takes office. In January, we are starting to enter the third month of his term. That said, today we're going to list 3 trends. It's not exactly a prophecy, but these are points on the geopolitical map that will be reached if he cannot deal with the obstacles along the way. So let's go to the first trend of the Trump administration. I have already shown in several videos, provided links to articles, and it is well documented on the internet. And now Trump has made it public that the Pentagon is one of the most corrupt entities in the world. The corruption of the Pentagon is not just in the billions, it is in the trillions. I always say this. They spend almost $1 trillion a year and cannot deliver the number of ships and submarines that China does. So Trump is going to try to reverse all of this. I find it somewhat difficult. Why? For several reasons. First of all, because during the Reagan years, there was a degradation of the American naval industry. Reagan withdrew the necessary funds. The industry contracted, many shipyards closed, and nowadays there are few that work practically only for the American Navy. The United States almost doesn't manufacture. Few people know this. They almost don't manufacture merchant ships, almost don't manufacture civilian ships. They manufacture very little. They don't factor into the overall count of the major players, which are China, South Korea, and Japan. So what happens? Trump will not be able, due to these industries being very small, to achieve sufficient scale in the short term to reduce the cost of ships. Then you say, oh, but he can start it and continue in the future. It's difficult, even though he would need to manage to have a successor with the same vision. I find this quite complicated because it's a problem that's been around for 40 years, starting back with the Reagan administrations. And it's not just that. A recent article mentioned that there were some millions of dollars worth of F-35 jet parts missing. Anyway, these are very serious problems, like a ship that starts and then is found to have design issues, like the LCS, the American Littoral Combat Ship, which had a series of problems. In short, Trump won't be able to solve this in his 4 years. Let's now analyze the second trend.
Vamos analisar agora a segunda tendência.
The United States will not be able to surpass China's military power in the Indo-Pacific. This is actually the corollary of the first part. Given the fact that they cannot keep up with Chinese industrial production, I recall that in the last 2 years, China has completed 7 nuclear submarines. Brazil has been trying to make its own for 40 years, and the Americans won't succeed. Of course, they will form a series of political alliances with the Philippines, Australia. They will court Vietnam. Japan has greatly served American interests. But the whole problem is that one thing is the mass of military numbers these countries present in planning. Another is whether this mass will be effectively committed to Washington's designs. I'll give an example, which is Australia. A few years ago, people might remember that the Biden administration sabotaged an agreement the Australians had to build conventional submarines with France, and offered nuclear submarines to Australia. Now there is talk that these submarines might have some design issues, and so on. So, it will be very difficult, in addition to internal policies, because given the fact that these countries are democracies, governments change, wills change, priorities change. In short, it's quite an uncertain terrain. And the trend in this case is for China to continue building an increasingly greater hegemony in the Indo-Pacific region. Around Taiwan, in the South China Sea, it already has. But the trend is for this to extend to more advanced regions, providing greater defensive capability for the Chinese. And there will be very little that the Americans can do. A third trend is that if Donald Trump's diplomacy wants to achieve significant results in the wars occurring around the world, all of which are characterized by a large military escalation, they will have to do more than they are currently doing. Trump's efforts, both in Ukraine and the Middle East, are merely palliative. The situation in Syria is beginning to generate international commotion. Nothing indicates that Israel and Hamas will not clash again in Gaza. And the negotiations with Ukraine and Russia have so far led nowhere. Trump takes a merely cosmetic approach to these wars. In reality, these are events of great complexity and would therefore require a deeper and consequently more complex approach that addresses all their characteristics. Ultimately, Trump wants to come with a ready-made solution to regions with very old problems that require solutions to be effectively worked out according to the objectives of all involved. So, to help you understand this a bit, we have prepared a presentation that we will show now about the superficialities of Trump's diplomatic decisions. We will also release it later for those who want to download it in a featured video. It will be a video about the geopolitical delusions of the Trump administration, which is actually this presentation you are about to see. The geopolitical delusions of Trump. How ego and empty deals resulted in failure in Ukraine and Gaza. Donald Trump's foreign policy often prioritizes spectacle over genuine strategy, mixing grandiose threats, deals that serve only his own interests, and a refusal to acknowledge the complexities of global conflicts. This is evident in his approach to Ukraine and Gaza, where his unrealistic solutions crumble under the pressure of real-world challenges.
Desmoronam sob a pressão dos desafios do mundo real. Por exemplo, a abordagem de Trump em relação.
For example, Trump's approach to Ukraine has been purely transactional. Recently, he orchestrated a tense meeting in the Oval Office with President Zelensky, attempting to coerce Ukraine into accepting a mineral deal that would benefit the United States. According to this proposal, Ukraine would hand over 50% of the future revenue from its oil, gas, and rare earth minerals, essential for technology and defense, to a fund controlled by the United States. In return, Trump offered only vague promises of continued military aid. Faced with the reality of a Russian invasion, Zelensky refused to give up his country's sovereignty, and the meeting quickly deteriorated. While Ukraine exposed Trump's transactional cruelty, Gaza highlighted his moral failings. His plan was to expel 1.8 million Palestinians from Gaza, demolish their homes, and transform the area into a luxurious Trump Riviera, a resort and a statue of himself. In collaboration with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Trump pressured Egypt and Jordan to take in the displaced Palestinians, threatening to cut American aid if they refused. However, the Arab leaders, aware of potential negative reactions, rejected what amounted to ethnic cleansing. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi declared, "We will never participate in this injustice," while Jordan's King Abdullah warned that it would destabilize the region. The scheme was not only morally indefensible, but also legally dangerous. Forcing civilians to leave their homes contravenes the Fourth Geneva Convention, and any American troops involved could face war crimes charges at the International Criminal Court. The failures of Trump's foreign policy are clear. He treats conflicts as marketing opportunities, viewing Ukraine's minerals and the Gaza coast as ways to achieve a personal victory rather than promoting stability. He also underestimated President Zelensky's determination and demonstrated a profound ignorance about the Middle East, failing to realize that allies would not jeopardize their own security for his vanity projects.
Sua própria segurança por causa de seus projetos de vaidade. Finalmente, desde a autoridade do TPI em Gaza até as decisões.
Finally, from the ICC's authority in Gaza to the International Court of Justice's decisions on the occupation, Trump dismisses international law as a mere inconvenience, ignoring the legal realities that govern conflicts in the real world. In Ukraine, his failed attempts at intimidation have worn down Western unity. In Gaza, his proposal for ethnic cleansing has heightened regional tensions and left the United States morally compromised. Both cases prove that treating geopolitics like a real estate business, where power is based on domination rather than partnership, only generates resentment and turbulence. Well, those who watched that video understood that there are three quite possible outcomes for the administration, unless he manages to correct the course.
Para a administração, para não ser que ele consiga corrigir o rumo. Para alguns dos eventos mostrados.
For some of the events shown here, even if he makes a complete course correction, he will hardly have time to implement the changes necessary to correct the United States trajectory. So that was our video for today. Comment on what you thought of our video, whether you agree, disagree, if you think the Trump administration will be wonderful or a failure, right? And help the growth of our media by giving super stickers, super chats, tips, which can be found in the channel description, or by enrolling in our courses and purchasing the books on our wish list. We'll be back shortly, always with responsibility and commitment. Speak up, Brazil. See you later.
Compromisso. Fé no Brasil, pessoal. Até mais.
Music, music.